bloody fantastic.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you can all hear me loud and clearly. We're relying on technology today, so if it goes wrong, don't blame me. But yes, a good morning to you all, to all of our guests. This is our third seminar. We've had a couple of ones before, one with Peter Ridsdale, which was a live event, and the second was with Sir Ian McGeechan. This is a real privilege today to be hosting our third event with three real eminent business people and speakers. Obviously, you are aware who they are, but that's one of the reasons why you've joined. I'll be handing over shortly to David, who will be acting as our MC. Just a couple of housekeeping. The toilets are probably upstairs on the left-hand side if you need them. If you hear the fire alarm, then go right outside your front door. And thirdly, any questions and answers, there is a chat box, but I think David might just confirm that when he takes the podium. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to David. Just before we do so, I want to thank Steve and Tony for giving their valuable time today. I hope you enjoy it and we find the whole event informative and inspiring. Over to you, David, and welcome to you all.
Thank you very much, Richard. Good morning, everybody. And also thanks to Steve and Tony. Looking forward to this morning. I should make clear, actually, firstly, that while my name is David Parkin, I'm no relation of Steve Parkin, which is very disappointing for me, but probably not for you, Steve. It once did benefit me, though, because I was given the best table in an Italian restaurant in Leeds because they thought I was the guy that was linked with buying Leeds United. And actually, I think they worked out I wasn't him when I tried to put the champagne on Steve's tab. So that was my brief claim to fame with you, Steve. But welcome. As many of you know, Steve and Tony are the driving forces, the chairman and the chief executive of Clipper Logistics, a major UK stock market quoted logistics business, which we'll hear more about today. The facts, the numbers are quite incredible. 46 sites, 10,000 employees, 470 vehicles, a 650 million market capital, a 650 million turnover and a 560 million market capital. I don't want to confuse those because I know your finance director, David Hodkin, will kill me, so I have to get the numbers right. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. I think, you know, we all know what the last 12 months have meant for each of us. They've had a massive impact on businesses. I'd be quite interested to know what the last 12 months has meant for you at Clipper. Perhaps you first, Steve, if you could give us an overview.
Yeah, interesting, David, and thanks and welcome everybody. I've looked at the list of people here, and I know quite a few of them, so I'll be interested to see what the questions come back at, and I won't answer any of that people will try to trip me up with. The last 12 months of the pandemic here at Clipper, I think has defined Clipper as a business, really. We, like everybody, when lockdown was announced, our share price collapsed to about £1.30. Personally wiped about £200 million off my private wealth. And I remember me and Tony looking at each other thinking, what do we do now? The old world stopped for about a week. And then online retail really took in. And I think what COVID has proven to everybody is that shopping online is now here and here forever. So we have huge growth in the preceding weeks after COVID was announced with online retail. We also was asked, I mean, remember, I'll never forget the day as long as I live. It's probably the most defining time of my career. It's Mothering Sunday. I was sat dreaming about my mum, I think, having a cup of coffee in my kitchen, and I had a phone call from Tony asking me or telling me that we'd had a phone call from the Ministry of Defence, and the country was in turmoil with the pandemic. PPE was the issue, which obviously we was all listening about on TV. And Tony had a phone call from the Ministry of Defence asking if Clipper could help with PPE. Now, obviously, our whole estate at our warehouse estate, or most of it, had stopped because of retail being basically closed down. So we quickly got to work. Tony rang me. We rang our team. By Sunday evening, we told the Ministry of Defence that we could help. And by Monday morning at 8 o'clock, we was on our way down to Daventry in the Midlands with our team of people to meet the MOD and the NHS to see where we could help. I mean, Tony will fill you in more of what we did. But I think it's safe to say that what we did for the country will go down in history. We've probably been mentioned about 20 times in the Prime Minister's briefings. They call it the Clipper service. What I was very proud about was within 3 days of having that phone call, we had set up a completely new supply chain for PPE. And it's still there, relevant today. And within 10 days of going live, I was getting emails from hospitals and trusts saying what a job we'd done. And actually, they've got too much PPE. So when I was coming home looking at the TV and people saying there's PPE problems, well, it wasn't a PPE problem after the first 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, and that's resulted, David, if you fast forward now 12 months, the share price has risen to, well, I think we £6.40, I think, a few weeks ago. And obviously I took advantage to cash some of them in. So the past 12 months has started from looking at down into the abyss to now 12 months later, the company being stronger and better than it's ever been. So COVID's been, from a personal perspective, I've been devastated for my children, obviously, and I'm sure everybody else was on this will have the same thoughts. I can't go to the pub, I can't go to my restaurant, as you rightly say, David. But I've been able to go to work, so I suppose that's been a benefit. So from a personal point of view, it's been a disaster. From a business point of view, I have to say it has been the defining moment for this business that I started 30 years ago.
And I think just to add to that, David, and the wider audience, I think the other thing as well that's been significant for us is the way that we reached out to all of our customers. And I think this is, we say there's two things that are Clipper buzzwords, and they're agility and ability. What we mean by that is we've got an absolute focus on retail supply chain. So we're not a generalist third-party logistics business. We do retail, whether online or offline. And the other buzzword is ability. And the ability piece is because we've got that focus, retail's in our DNA. So we know how to do things instinctively, and our teams are developed in that way. So when a challenge comes along, we wrestle with it and find a solution. And most of our customers now are in shared use facilities. There was a wonderful quote, if you remember, from Benjamin Franklin, that there's nothing more certain than death and taxes. Well, we add into that now that the other definite is that retail forecasting is wrong. So we've always encouraged retailers to share facilities, and then they can be flexible in terms of services and how they operate, and they're not saddled with an overhead that they don't need. And as we first entered lockdown, as Steve mentioned earlier on, this time last year, what happened was we were seeing retailers who got an online capability suddenly having their abilities outstripped. Volumes of 300% and 400% uplifts were not unusual. And we also found retailers with high street capabilities suddenly finding they got overhead they didn't need. So as opposed to just sharing resources within a site, we created the view that our resources should be fluid across the UK. And therefore, could we move resources around? And what that resulted in us doing was opening up a food distribution centre for Tesco's, getting involved with the NHS, as Steve mentioned already, doing food activity work for Morrison's, delivering bread for Warburton's, you name it, we did it. And that meant that we could keep our employees busy, but at the same time support businesses who ordinarily would have been having a challenge by taking cost from the businesses that didn't need it and applying that cost to businesses that did. meant that we were able to support a lot of our customers, and we've had fantastic feedback from our customers through the year. One in particular did then in the summer there was always the clap for the NHS, and one of our customers, his entire board did a clap for Clipper, because he said without Clipper they wouldn't have been around. So actually the spirit of collaboration and partnership, which is really what Steve created back in '92 and what really permeates through the business now, was really put to the test in COVID. And as much as Steve's mentioned the NHS, it is really important that you understand the scale of what we did. We were asked by the MOD, because they've been asked by the government. It was the 101 Air Assault Brigade. They get sent into any war zone first, and they've been asked by Boris to help. And what we were told at the time was there was a very real risk that the NHS supply chain at that point in March of last year was 2 to 3 weeks away from complete meltdown, because the stretch that was being placed upon it because of the requirements of PPE meant that actually the whole network would grind to a standstill. So the idea was, could you carve out PPE and create a separate warehousing and transport network, which is exactly what Steve said. That's what we did. We did that in days. The view pre-talking to us was it was weeks away. Well, we actually achieved it in 4 days. We put systems in. We created warehousing capability. Since then, it's grown arms and legs. We've gone from a small operation in Daventry to now in millions of square feet across the UK. 4 weeks after go live, we then created an eBay solution to service not just hospitals, but care homes, GP surgeries, fire stations and schools. So actually we created a website solution and a fulfillment solution using our knowledge and capability of retail to support the medical requirements of the UK in terms of PPE. And we're still doing that today. So billions and billions of items of PPE have gone through our systems, and we're very proud of it. But we're equally extremely proud of those retail customers that we've supported through what's been a very challenging year for them. And the fact that the vast majority have survived and will survive, we feel as if we played our part in that for some of those guys.
Thanks, Tony. And I think, you know, we often hear the negatives. We've heard the positives recently about the government's vaccination programme, but you're stressing the positives of the PPE, and where the government was able to work with you and other private businesses and the Ministry of Defence to actually pull together to deliver what was.
And the scale of it, I mean, let's be clear and just help some of the audience understand. You know, you went from a situation where pre the entering of COVID, I think the procurement team in the NHS looked after PPE was less than 20 people. At its peak, it became 350 people. Nothing to do with us, that's central government buying stock. But what it meant was those 330 people who were new to the role were going around the world buying stock. Now, because the rest of the world was trying to buy the same stock. So it was put on containers, put on ships and sent to the UK. But it was bought basically using the internet. So we'd got boxes of stock arriving with Chinese markings, with no sense whatsoever, with packing notes didn't make sense. We were using Google Translator to take pictures of boxes to try and work out what was inside it. We had situations where people were very willing and trying to make PPE for the NHS, and lots of people making things, and lots of retailers were sending us things. We got sent welding masks. I don't know quite what we were supposed to do with those. We got sent DeWalt joiners and builders glasses. But we've also got sent a lot of product that was made, you know, from people's curtain material and other things, which was very nice of them, but actually in a surgical environment doesn't quite work. So the identifying of product and then the making sense of it, and does it satisfy UK requirements, became a massive industry, because we were buying as a country, buying from factories and from locations we've not bought from before. And if it says it's a blue face mask and you open it and it's green, is that just a colour problem, or actually is it the wrong product? And therefore the level of complication that's introduced was dramatic. As was, you know, we went from a standing start to servicing 500 hospitals, and then servicing, you know, 50, 60,000 outlying locations in terms of care homes and GPs, everybody else, and created that solution with no history. You know, one of the things that I thought was very interesting last year's peak, and everyone talks about, you know, how does year-on-year retailing compare, and how does the forecasting look? Well, nobody in last year's retail peak had a clue about forecasting, because nobody had been in lockdown before, and nobody had been in COVID before, and therefore, how do you plan activity? So the need for Clipper and other providers to be incredibly elastic really put us to the test.
Thanks. And you talk about retail and the changing face of retail, both Tony and Steve. Are we seeing? We keep constantly hear about the death of the high street. Has the pandemic killed off the British high street? I'd be really interested in your view.
I'll pass you on to Tony, because Tony is the art of this. But I'll just say before he starts, definitely not. No. COVID changed retail forever. We believe COVID will also slow down online, because there is pent-up demand, and people have gone from having no time to having a lot of time. And the millennials especially, which is what we're seeing, the millennials are now deciding, well, you know what, I don't want to buy on a screen anymore, I want to actually go to the shops. And we believe the high street will start to come back on stream. Tony will give you a bit more.
Well, effectively, I mean, the logic for that is quite simple, from my opinion. And when we came out of the lockdown last summer, if you remember, Primark had massive queues outside. You know, some shops, people queuing 2 hours before the doors opened. So as Steve exactly has said, there is pent-up demand, and also we have to accept that for a lot of people, me including, you know, wandering around the shops on a Saturday afternoon and having a cup of coffee is a social event. You know, it's not about need. And if we all bought based on need, we'd all have one suit, one pair of socks, one pair of underpants, and one pair of shoes. Well, actually, the fact that we don't is because you don't buy on need. You're buying emotion, you're buying things that go with it. And therefore, if you're buying a thing, if you're buying a stapler, you can buy that online, and you go online and find the cheapest stapler based on the brand you want. If you want to buy a new suit, I bet you, David, didn't go online and say, I want the cheapest suit I can find, and I want it this afternoon.
Oh, I did.
My tail will kill you, Steve.
But what you did was you bought based on a brand you like, a designer you like, a particular fabric, a feel of it, whatever it happens to be. And if you look at fashion returns, the two biggest reasons for fashion returns are, the biggest one being, it doesn't suit me. I've tried it on, it looks a bit of a bugger, it's not me, or it don't fit. Both of those issues wouldn't be an issue if you were 10 or 15 years ago in a shop, because you would buy something that fit, and you would buy fabric that you liked or a product you liked by trying it on. And what's happened with the acceleration of COVID is, because we've been restrictive on going to the stores, and even when the stores opened, you won't have to try things on in a store for a period. What you've got is people have been buying product and sending it back. Now, that's done several things. It's proliferated white van man. There's now transit vans, thousands and thousands more vans than there were. And home delivery for everybody is the only way to interact, really, apart from some click and collect. So from a government perspective, you've now got white van man blowing out of the water. You've got air quality issues with that. You've got congestion issues with that, all of which the government's going to have to address. But you've also got those retailers with a high street store presence, realizing that customers like to interact with them. And I think the mental change that's come this year is retailers having to wake up to, what is a shop about? A shop isn't about being a collection point for a parcel. And if you ordered that suit, let's say you ordered that suit from John Lewis, and if John Lewis fulfilled that by basically putting it into an oversized pizza box and delivering it to the John Lewis store, and you walk into the store and pick up that box and put it in your arm and walk out, they've missed an opportunity to sell something to you. They've made themselves a collection point. What we're now saying with the click and collect network that we've created, we've got our own network called ClickLink, which has now got 30 retailers using it, is we can be extremely sustainable. We can deliver to your stores without any packaging. We could fundamentally say to you, using your suit example, you've ordered a couple of sizes of suit here, David. Have you got 2 minutes to try them on? Or shall I make them ready for you to take them home? So you're actually getting the store staff interact with you. And if they've got anything about them, they will then try and upsell and cross-sell. They will tell you there's a wonderful shirt and tie that go with that suit. There's actually some new shoes that have just been delivered. Can I get them for you? They're fantastic with that suit.
She's 5'10" and blonde hair, David, so obviously you do buy.
Yeah, and that principle of a retailer being able to evangelize about his brand. The best example of a retailer who's got this right is Apple. You go into the Apple store on Regent Street in London, and there are people in that store evangelizing about their product while you're in that store. They're convincing you that spending £1,000 on the latest iPhone is a much better bet for you than going to Tesco's for a 20 quid mobile phone. And for most people, they're going to use it as a mobile phone. So actually, They're convincing you about the power of the brand and the relationship with the brand. You struggle to get that through a screen. If a screen says to you, people who bought this also bought that, it isn't the same emotional attachment, which is why fashion brands and others have people who evangelize for them, which is why there are people out there talking about, isn't this product wonderful? I'm Kim Kardashian and I like this dress, because it's doing the same thing. So if you're going to drive footfall back to the high street needs to wake up to the fact it's about selling. It's not about standing there and just working on a till. But it's going to survive. The high street will survive because people fundamentally view it as a social experience.
Thank you. Just a reminder, if anybody's got any questions you'd like to ask, please add them in the chat and we will definitely get to them before the end of today. So interesting views from both of you on the retail sector, and quite a positive really. What are your thoughts on the economy going forward? The Chancellor's got the budget next week. Are you relatively positive about the outlook for the UK economy?
Well, I think Steve speaking, David. I am positive about the UK economy. I believe obviously there's going to be a bounce because of COVID. The unknown at the moment is when furlough stops. Obviously, I believe furlough and some of the government help has prevented a lot of businesses going bust already. It would have probably gone bust without COVID. So it'll be interesting to see what the fallout is from that. But I work with the government on certain committees, and I can assure you there is a huge amount of funding being thrown at the UK pre-Brexit and pre-COVID. So I'm quite bullish, knowing what I know through government. So I don't think we're going to have an issue. Just the question mark is what happens with them businesses after furlough and all the government help and stuff. Your views, Tony? Yeah,
and I think similar to that. I think what's happened, I think COVID has made a lot of people realise that actually deep sea sourcing of a lot of product, certainly for the NHS, created a problem. Some of our supply chains are very, very extended, and therefore I think there'll be more views around UK manufacture, near sourcing activity, whether that's in the UK or in Europe, as opposed to a lot of it being in China and the Far East. So I think there'll be some changes in that regard. I think from a technology perspective, the UK is very capable and very advanced. We are, look at the AstraZeneca vaccine and so on. There's been lots of good work that we do in the UK, and we've been very quick at mobilising. I think we're very tech savvy. I think there's going to be a period of transition for a lot of people there. I think, the unfortunate consequence of COVID has been that a loss of a number of retailers, which has either been COVID related or just general business related, and COVID accelerated it. But there were a lot of people who may well have to reskill and upskill. So I think there'll be a period of challenge with that. And I also think there's a period of adjustment coming with Brexit. The simple reality at the minute is that because we've got activity both in the UK and in Europe, we've got 2 sites in Poland and 6 sites in Germany and a site in Dublin. We are already working either side of the Brexit divide, and we're finding already solutions helping people with how do they service both sides of that new wall, in effect, in terms of legislation and taxation. So I think that will create opportunities. But I think from the UK perspective, we're going to go through a period of retraining and reskilling, I think, for some people. I think they're going to find that the roles that they had probably not going to come back. But I do think as a country, we are very resilient. So I'm very optimistic about the future, but I am very conscious that in the short term, it might be a bit of a bumpy road.
How has Brexit affected your business, Tony? Has it been disruptive, or are you finding...
I think we're finding opportunities, interestingly. We did forecast a few years ago a couple of things about Brexit, and we fortunately reacted quite strongly. So I'll come to the specifics about Brexit in a second, but if you go back sort of 2 or 3 years when Brexit was kicking in and we were looking at what did that mean, there was a lot of noise at the time in our industry about migrant workers and the fact that actually the UK is heavily reliant on people from Europe and particularly from Eastern Europe. And there was this false perception that a lot of the migrant workers that were here were actually a drain on our economy, where actually the opposite was true. Most of the migrant workers coming to the UK were genuinely adding value into roles within the hospitality sector as well as in the logistics sector. And what we realized was if you look at the actual demographic profile of a lot of those people, they were not coming here to basically use and abuse our services as a country. They were primarily students who had finished university And a bit like UK kids might go to Canada or Australia or New Zealand for a year off and do something somewhere else, that was the same with European students coming to the UK. So we had a lot of very bright people working for us who then decided, because of Brexit, that they'd go somewhere else in Europe. And there was a drain of people who could help us with seasonal activity. So the industry was basically sat on its hands saying, what do we do about this? And fortunately, Steve was approached out of the blue by a new charity called Tempus Novo, which was an ex-offenders charity who were looking at how to position people back into society after having had a sentence in a prison, and how to get them back in and contributing. So we reached out to Tempus Novo, we had a chat with them about capability, and then we tasked our HR director with looking at other pockets of society that may well have been overlooked. And people, if I go back 20 years, pre the sort of big upsurge into people coming to the UK to work, if you wanted seasonal labour in the run to Christmas, you asked young mums who didn't really want a job but would do it for a few weeks, or you asked people who had retired, or people who were, for some reason, had taken themselves out of the job market, but might want 6 to 7 weeks of work at Christmas. So we need to refine those people. And we've reached out to MENCAP, the mental health charity. We've reached out to READ, a long-term unemployment charity. We've reached out to Emmaus, the homeless charity. And we've now got about a dozen charities, and we badged all this as Fresh Start. And Fresh Start now is, how do we get people into our workplace that have otherwise been disadvantaged in terms of employment? And pleasingly, 10% of our workforce now, 2.5 years on, have come through that route. So that's given us resilience against change. It's also given us great credentials in terms of our social credentials and so on, what we're doing for society in general. But what it also opened up to us was the opportunity to say, right, well, let's look at things differently. So Brexit's going to come. We've got capability in Europe. How do we say to our customers, actually, we can help you either side of that? So we've now got about 1,000 people working in Poland. We've got 6 sites in Germany. We're helping both European retailers and UK-based retailers now, both in Europe and in the UK. Post-Brexit and post the challenges that were introduced by the carriers saying several weeks ago they couldn't service Europe, we've been actually routing inventory differently into Europe. We process returns differently to try and keep the returns in the territory where they're being processed. So actually, in a strange way, Brexit looks like it's going to be very positive for us. So we have done well in terms of raising our profile through the challenges the UK has faced in the past year. And we think with Brexit, we're going to equally do quite well in the coming year.
And David, that hasn't happened by accident, by the way. We invested in Europe in around about 2010 or just before 2008. Once the Brexit result had been announced, I can safely say I was a Remainer, but we accept that there was a vote, so we have to vote where we have to go where the vote took us, and that was to exit the European Union. I remember on that day deciding that our strategy was going to be to grow as fast as we possibly could in Europe, because at that time, 5 years ago, however long it was, we decided it was best to have one foot in each camp. And by the way, I'm so pleased we took that strategy, because it is exactly how it's worked out.
Yeah. So what we did was use our German acquisitions. We did 2 small acquisitions, one in 2008 and one in 2012. And then using that capability, we've extended out of Germany into Poland. So we've done 2 greenfield startups in Poland and in Poznan, which is about 2 hours across the German-Polish border. And that is servicing both UK retailers with their returns management capability, but also supporting German retailers with their fulfillment capability. So we proved to ourselves that working in Europe and the Clipper culture works very well, providing you recruit local knowledge. A bit like the HSBC advertising, you want local knowledge and local understanding, but you overlay on that Clipper capabilities in terms of solution design and so on.
Okay.
Great, thank you. A question from one of our attendees, Robert Newman. What are your thoughts regarding the small amount of tax paid by online retailers? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, actually. I think that there does need to be a degree of levelling up in some way. And I'm not suggesting that what I want to do is go out and hurt retailers, because if you're an omni-channel player, so therefore you've got online and offline, any taxation that you're going to pick up is going to be a problem. If you're a big global player, like an Amazon or an eBay or somebody of that scale, you should be paying taxes that are appropriate. And therefore, I do think there is a need to think about business rates and around how taxation could be fairer. Because I do think, an Amazon possibly has a bit of an unfair advantage. But I appreciate that's something for the government and not particularly for me. But I do appreciate that there does need to be a look at it.
Thanks, Tony. Question from Stephen Mitchell. Can you ask Steve what he thinks would have happened to Clipper if they hadn't had that phone call from the government? Would Clipper have survived, and how?
Absolutely, we would have survived. I mean, let's not hide behind the government, the NHS, and the PPE. We helped the country, and we helped the country for very little fee. David, I can't obviously tell you what, but let's just say it's probably the smallest earning bit of business that we do. So the NHS work, the PPE work, has just been work, and it's obviously enabled us to fill the gaps in our estate and use the retailers' warehouses where we had capacity. The way our business is structured in terms of its contracts, 70% of our business is contracted on an open book basis, and for want of a better word and how to describe that, is whether we move one item or 1 million, we get the same amount of money. So contractually, Clipper was protected somewhat, and it's pleasingly our use of furlough or any government help has been very minimal. Only in outbases in the middle of Wales and the far reaches of Scotland is where we've had to furlough people, but that's been minimal, single digit.
And I think the bit as well to think about there, David, is if you think about what I said about the fluidity of our teams, that's what's helped us through the year. Actually, carving out the NHS work is good. We're very proud of what we've been able to achieve to support the UK. But actually, as Steve said, the reality for us is that the vast majority of our customers have survived. A few of them are reshaping themselves, but actually have survived. And our e-com customers have gone off the Richter scale. Genuinely, there was reports in the summer that every day was a Black Friday, and that wasn't overstated. We were 300-400% up in terms of activity. One of our customers, we needed to recruit just for the start of the Boxing Day sale, an extra 2,500 people for one account just to start on that day. Wow. So this isn't about would we have had a problem without the NHS? No, we've reacted to the challenges of our customers. We've been very collaborative and partnership focused on how to support them and how to mitigate some of their cost. And as I mentioned with Tesco's, we don't work with Tesco's. We historically used to do their F&F online work before they took it offline. But we were asked by them, would we open up a grocery distribution centre in the Northwest? And we did it in 4 weeks. And through the first lockdown and through the summer months last year, we serviced 70 stores in the Northwest. So it wasn't about us just battening down the hatches. We were grabbing business to support people. And therefore, no, I could say hand on heart, the NHS has been an interesting project. It's been extremely demanding, but it hasn't really added massively to our profitability in the year.
Okay, thanks. Now I'm keen to press the rewind button a little bit to take both of you back to your lives pre-Clipper, because both of you have had interesting experiences before you came to Clipper. Steve, you started your life. Is it right that you were a mine worker?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief synopsis, and for everybody listening, most of them people listening probably have heard this before. I was born in Alton Moor, would you believe, when my grandparents, and left there when I was a few months old, and moved to Middleton with my parents. Miggy is probably more commonly known, and I lived there for 21 years. I left there when I was 21 years of age. And when I first left school, Middleton is probably some of you know is an old mining village, or was many, many years ago. So most of my friends from school went down the pit. I didn't fancy going down the pit, so I actually got a job training to be a butcher for Farm Stores, which is now part of Asda. after 3 or 4 months of cutting my hands and not being very good with a knife in it, I decided that wasn't for me. Most of my pals had gone down the mines, and they were earning big money compared to what I was earning. So I decided that I'd take the plunge and I'd go down the mine. Unfortunately, that wasn't a job that suited me either, David, because going down the mine at 4 o'clock in the morning and coming out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the winter, I didn't see daylight for 6 months. And it wasn't for me. So I ended up spending about 18 months down there, but then got out. And then decided, I was always car mad, I was always mad of vehicles, and then decided I'd start driving. And I drove for a number of years, got my heavy goods license, and then met somebody in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, who offered me a job driving a transit van. But from driving an articulated vehicle to driving a transit van, you probably remember the Yorkie adverts many years ago, and I thought I was in. So going back and driving a transit van didn't appeal to me until he doubled my wages. And I'll remember to this day, he offered me £300 a week, and I was £120 a week driving Arctics around the country. And he offered me £300 a week driving a transit van. It was basically delivering fashion from London into Leeds, Manchester, etc., which is what I did. I started working for him. I worked for him for about 5 years till probably the late 20s. And then, unfortunately, I had a big row with him over a woman, would you believe, David? So anyway, we had a big argument. I packed my job in, told him to go stick the job, and walked out. But unfortunately, I had a mortgage, and I didn't know what to do. And because I've been involved in fashion and I knew a few people, I decided effectively I'd just go out and buy a van and start on my own. I went bust the first time. I got 1 or 2 vans, all in Leeds United colours, yellow, white and blue, SNP Transport. And after about 2 years, I got into trouble and went bust. I managed to survive. One of the vehicles that I owned was on hire purchase. It got taken back by the finance company, which is Sovereign Leasing in Manchester. I'll never forget it. My sister got me I was made bankrupt. My sister got me a £2,000 bank loan from Yorkshire Bank. I went across to Manchester, Sovereign Leasing in Deansgate. I gave them £1,800 in cash, and I took the van out of the compound. I sprayed it green, and I called it Clipper. And it's called Clipper after Clipper Seafoods, when I was a long-distance lorry driver delivering fish from Aberdeen, and I delivered it for a company called Clipper Seafoods, and that's where the name Clipper came from. You've heard that before, David, anyway, but there you go.
Yeah, I have, but
that's my story, Dave. That's how I started, David.
it's a great story, but also along that road, you've met some very interesting people, and one of them was Philip Green, who you've always said was a big supporter of yours when you were early in your career.
David, I speak to Philip Green every day of the week now, even now, and I feel sorry for him. He's stuck in Monaco. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't feel sorry for him. I actually feel sorry for him because of what's happened. But I speak to him most days. I've been down to Monaco 3 or 4 times over the last 12 months to see him. He never gave me one solitary penny, but he gave me business. And, you know, the early days I was a whipping boy, but he did exactly what he said he would do in business to me. Never gave me a penny, drove a very hard bargain, was hard work. You know, I've been to London and I've had cups of coffee thrown at me and all sorts. But the thing about him, for me, was his generosity in terms of his time and everything. And he was always straight with me. So I can only tell people what I've experienced myself. And to me, he's been, listen, I know his failings, I know what he's good at, I know what he's bad at. But for me, he's always been 100% helpful. And it's some of the advice he's given me over the years. I mean, the best advice he ever gave me in the early days, he said to me, play to your strength and employ your weakness. It's the best bit of advice I've ever been given.
So Does Tony cover the weaknesses then?
Well, the one thing
man.
about this management team, David, which is absolutely unique, and everybody tells me it's unique, is that we all benefit, or we all help each other. Yeah. We all dovetail with each other. Me, David, and Tony, we're the three musketeers according to the city. But we all dovetail, we all complement each other's skills. I couldn't do what he does, but he can't do what I do. Right. So, and as long as we all realize that, which we do, we've been together now for 15, 16 years, all of us. Yeah. So we all recognize our strengths and weaknesses. And, I'm a big person on loyalty. Loyalty means everything to me. And I am loyal to my team, but I need my team to be loyal to me. And I am sit here, honestly and truthfully, I have got the most loyalist management team anybody could ever have. I couldn't do this. Isn't about Steve Parkin, this business. Yeah, my name might be above the door. I might get the accolades. This is about a team. It's like watching Leeds United. 11. There's players in this team who all play to the strengths. And again, as Philip said to me, employ your strength, play to your strength, employ your weakness. I don't know what my weaknesses are. I must have a lot of weaknesses, David, because there's 12,000 people work here.
We need a longer session than this.
I got it wrong somewhere, didn't I?
So I like your long list.
Tony, your background is equally fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you train as an architect?
Yeah, I trained.
You went into retail.
Yeah, I not far from Steve actually in terms of where I grew up. I grew up in Halton. I went to Corpus Christi at the bottom of Halton Moor, so that's where I went to school. And then I went off to university. I was the first person in my family ever to go to university, and everyone thought I was slightly mad because my dad was a building contractor. And I went to Leeds to study architecture engineering, and it was twinned with a degree in Pennsylvania at Penn State in the US. So I did a year in Penn State. And I graduated in the 80s when the building industry was in a mess, and it was almost like you could pay for the privilege of working. So I worked as an architect for a few years for what was Courage Breweries, who acquired John Smith's, and I was the North of England architect for John Smith's. Then I ended up deciding it wasn't for me. For all sorts of reasons, and I applied for what was then a graduate recruitment scheme with the Burton Group, and I ended up in Hudson Road in Leeds on my first day, thinking I ain't got a clue what I'm doing here. And 6 weeks later, I got sent to Milton Keynes because there was a problem with Top Man. And similar to Steve not forgetting things, I can still remember the journey down the M1, thinking, what am I going to do when I get there? I've been here 6 weeks.
That's when we first met, by the way, me and Tony.
So my 2-year graduate scheme with the Burton Group was genuinely 6 weeks. And I was just chucked into Top Man and told, you'll be all right, on the basis we haven't got anybody else. I worked there for about 4 or 5 years. I then got headhunted to work for a small business that was going to float, a business called Rosebiz, which was a curtains and bedding business. So I joined that. We're turning about 28 million as a private business. We then floated within 6 months. And it got to a peak of about a 650 million business by acquiring Benson Beds and Sleep Masters and Harvey's Furnishings and all sorts of things. So I was in-house logistics and IT. And then I did a retail buyout of a chunk of it. 3 of us bought a chunk of the business and ran that for a few years. And then at the end of 2005, thought this just isn't me. I was getting dragged into front-end retail and it wasn't me. And early part of 06, I woke up one morning and I had this bizarre thought in my head that I'd only ever worked in-house. I'd worked for businesses, whether it was the Arcadia Burton Group or whether it was the home style emerging business as it was, and then the big group it became. And not lots of third-party logistics businesses would knock on my door and try and sell me a dream. And it occurred to me that I had a massive distrust and dislike of the way that logistics was sold. Because you can't cold call a warehouse. You can't knock on someone's door and say, can I do your transport? It just don't work like that. So I reached out to Steve, who, as Steve says, I knew Steve, but sort of just as passing friends, really. I'd never worked with Steve. And I also reached out to a company called Great Bear, which was now part of Kalina, which was a food logistics business. Both of them were very generous with the time. Great Bear invited me to a board meeting. They chatted about third party. Steve and I met at Lagrillard, I think, in Leeds, and we had a chat. And he said, "Well, what don't you get?" I said, "Well, I don't get you make any money." I said, "From a user's perspective, the sales process in logistics is really irritating. People interact with Steve because of Steve. A salesperson knocking on a door who knows nothing, who tries to convince you that you need a new distribution center, it's an irritating process." So he said, "What would you do?" I said, "Well, I'd sack your sales force." I'd say the board of the sales force, and we should use the directors to evangelize about Clipper, and we should grow based on project success, and we should become a thought leader. And he said, well, why don't you come and do it then? So I think at that point we were turning.
There's a bit in there that he didn't, but he does know now, as I told you. The best thing about that was interesting, because I've always been pally with Tony. I've always rated him as an individual, and I bought a business called DTS, and it trebled the size of Clipper. You know, it was double the size of we were. So it was a big acquisition, and I recruited. What I was told was the best MD in logistics in the UK was I can't really name him because in case people don't know him, so I won't name him. But it was a little Scotch fella actually. And this
narrows it down, Steve.
That narrows it down, David. Yeah, to about 4 million. So there you go. He had ginger ale, so that's probably another 50% out.
Keep moving on.
So basically, I recruited this guy on an arm and a leg, and everybody I spoke to said, no, he's the best thing since sliced bread. You know, you know, by getting him, you put a marker out, everybody will be thinking, oh, how's Clipper done that, etc., etc. So I did. So I recruited him. I smashed my wage structure to get him, and not giving too many secrets out. I started to have doubts very, very quickly, and I think Tony will agree. My biggest attribute is, because maybe because I come from the street, is sussing people. You know, it takes me seconds, and I'm usually right. 99% of the times I'm right. And I started getting negative thoughts of this guy, and I bought him, would you believe, a 911 Porsche to come and work for me. You know, it was one of them. And one day he said to me, "Oh, my car's in for service." And I remember thinking to myself, "It's a brand new Porsche. How can that be having a service already?" So I asked him, and I didn't ask him. I went to, we got the secretary to go to the garage and see how many miles was on the clock. It's a funny story, this. There was about 12,000 miles on the clock in about 3 weeks. And I'd worked it out at 65 miles, 60 mile an hour. He was driving 11 hours a day. Well, what turned out, he was driving 11 hours a day, but he had a young sweetheart who lived down in Plymouth, and he was traveling from Milton Keynes down to Plymouth every night to go see this woman. As I found out. So as Tony came to see me, asking me, did I have any work? This guy was ready to get the boot or the bullet. So unfortunately, Tony walked in, and I thought, oh, perfect. Yeah. And listen, he'll say this himself. We've been very close ever since. And you know, I know more about him than he knows about himself, and he probably vice versa. So it's been a great addition, Tony, to the business, and hopefully he'll tell you that I've been.
We've grown, and now let's be clear, as Steve said, you know, Steve, David, and I, you know, since Float have been welded together. You know, we floated in 2014. You know, our growth has been sort of 15-16% per annum ever since. You know, we floated with a turnover of a couple of 100 million. We're now sort of north of 600 million. So actually, we've done very well. It hasn't been a flash in the pan. It's not been a one-year event. If you go back to 2006, when Steve and I first started to be together, you know, we were turning then about 70, and we're now turning north of 600. And that's not been by accident. That's been a lot of effort, a lot of hard work. You know, business doesn't do itself. But I absolutely believe that people buy from people. And you've got to be there thick and thin. It's not about, you know, my biggest irritation about third-party logistics businesses back in the day when I was on the receiving end of it was I would guarantee in the first discussion with a customer, the first discussion with me as a potential customer, whoever was sat in front of me would ask me, do I like golf? Do I like tennis? Do I like Formula One? I don't like football. And magically I'd get an invite to an event. And I'm sat there thinking, I've got a problem because I'm getting kicked around by the chief exec because we need a logistics strategy and you want to take me to see Man United. Actually, you're missing the point. So our view is we don't do hospitality like everybody else. We don't sponsor the industry like everybody else. We sponsor activities with Retail Week and Drapers because that's where our customers are and that's what our customers need help with. We sponsor things like Guide to Growth, which is a portal to help new businesses start up. We help evolving businesses. We've got a catalogue of small businesses who met us even before they turned anything, and we've helped grow. Because actually we believe that if you help a small business grow, you can incrementally add value to that business as they grow. And if you get it right, you stay. Morrison's has now been a customer for 24 years. That isn't an accident. And therefore we have to keep adding value. So our role is to keep understanding the sector, understanding commonalities across those customers, finding solutions for that, and then helping all the customers benefit from it. So our returns management capability, which we honed with people like ASOS, is actually across all of our customers. It's the same capability, because whether you're a small startup business that gets 5 returns a week, or you're a million returns a week type business, your customers need the same service. They need to be treated fairly, because returns is the final touch point of that brand. And therefore your lasting memory of that brand is how good or bad your returns are handled. So we think like a retailer, and we worry about things that retailers worry about. It isn't about a sales pitch. It's about understanding and wanting to be a partner.
Thank you. A couple of questions from the audience. One from Michael Stewart. As leaders in a local business success story, what do you believe are the key success factors that any business should be mindful of?
In terms of
as a successful local business, what are the things you think you need to be mindful of?
I think I touched on earlier, David, loyalty. I think success, I think this is what the question is. Success is all about people. If you think about Clipper Logistics, we do not sell a commodity. We sell a service. That service revolves around people. So we have to manage and look after be respectful of our people. You got to remember that we are probably aiming, or not probably, we do aim at the lower end of the spectrum of pay. So when you get to minimum wage, there's an awful lot of companies who offer minimum wage, obviously, and a little bit above minimum wage. The interesting thing, the key stat at Clipper Logistics is our staff turnover, which is 1/3 of anybody else in our industry. Ask me the question. Tell me why, David.
Why?
Why, Steve?
Why, David, is how we treat people, David.
Right.
And I think the thing to link into that, because Steve's absolutely right. You know, we firmly believe that we promote from within. And to demonstrate the success of that, we now have our own Clipper Logistics apprenticeship degree course at Sheffield Hallam. You can do a Clipper Logistics degree. You can do a Clipper Logistics MBA. We use ILM training at every level in our business because we are constantly recruiting and training fresh talent. And the reason for that is that we know that Steve coined a phrase a few years ago that resonates across the business. And that is, you should never have a new baby and a new babysitter. And what we mean by that is if you've got a new customer, what you don't want to do is put that new customer into a new site with a new team, because it'll be a recipe for disaster. So you need to put old hands into that new customer so they understand what we do and how we do it. And you can only create those old hands if you've got spare in the system that are trained for the next level. So we've got at every level trainee team leaders, trainee managers, trainee directors, because we're bringing talent on all the time. And the Sheffield Hallam experience has been really fascinating, because what that's allowed us to do is we're now into our 3rd year of our apprenticeship degree. And we've offered that not only to people in the market, you know, do you want to become a Clipper Logistics apprentice? But we've also offered that degree course to people that are in our business who actually feel that they would have been better going to university, but never had the ability to go, either because of cost or circumstances. So some of the people in our apprenticeship degree are actually existing people who want to better themselves. And we're happy to support that because actually we're getting more talent for the future. So the key thing is to surround yourself with good talent. Don't underestimate that your people are your best shop window. What your people do and what your people do when they go home and talk about you really matters. And if you're going to be a service provider or you're providing any sort of solution to any other customer, how you interact as a business with that customer really matters. So I think people underestimate the importance of good recruitment.
And David, just on that, and David and Tony's 100% right on what he's told you about how we do it in our business. But there is one factor above anything. You have to have leadership. Now, 99.9% of people, whether you believe it or not, are followers. Okay, me as the leader of this business, I'm a leader, and I know some of your people there know me, will tell you, and you know me, David. You can imagine when the bullets start firing and they're in the trenches, who the first person who gets his head blown off and jumps out of the trenches is me. People have to see that leadership.
Yeah, you've got to be visible.
Human beings have to see it. You know, Churchill. I'm not comparing myself to Churchill, but you know, everybody who's been a leader in life, Margaret Thatcher. You know, people have to. You have to be sometimes outspoken. You know, you've got sometimes being take the bull by the horns, and but never be autocratic. Always be respectful to people. But somebody sometimes has to say no. That's it. We have to move forward.
And I think the other thing linked into that, and again using another military reference. I'm one of those guys who likes quotes, so regularly when I'm speaking to the team, I'll end up sticking a quote in. But the one that best sums up Clipper is a General Patton quote from the Second World War. And General Patton once said that a good plan executed right now is far better than an excellent plan executed next week. And our view is, if you've got absolute inbuilt knowledge and ability and you trust yourself, you're not going to go far wrong. But don't pretend to be an expert when you're not, because you'll get found out.
Okay, thank you very much. Steve, I've got a question for you here. It's from Ross Heppenstall. Now, I know Ross is a very good sports journalist, so we might be looking for some headlines here.
Okay.
He says, one for Steve, how close did you come to any possible significant investment or takeover of Leeds United, and how much of a mess was the club in then? And he'd also, how would you assess the tenure of Andrea Radrizzani over these past 4 years? And finally, how do you see the club's ownership structure unfolding in the coming years with the 49ers ownership, etc.?
Okay, well,
there, Steve.
Well, I don't think I'm tied into any NDAs now, because it's a long time ago. So I can tell you the truth, and it's never been told in public before. So, and some of the people who are on here know about it. So, but I'll give you warts and all. I have been linked with Leeds United for every year for the past 20 years since I was successful, I think. The true facts are I have come close to making an investment in Leeds United twice. First of all, when the club was first taken over in 2004, the Gerald Krasner regime approached me. We put a deal together, nearly did the deal, did a due diligence, cost me about 400,000 quid in costs. But we got to a problem, and I think it's fair to say most people know what the problem was that we had £90 million of bond debt that everybody said had been wiped out. It hadn't been wiped out, it had been deferred. And if there was a buyout of the club, the 90 million became payable again. Gerald Krasner, got a little bit more Gerald, but I think it was Melvin Levi, God rest his soul. That was a nonsense. It wasn't. It was still to be payable. So obviously that killed any deal. I looked at it again with GFH, but we told them it needed 40 million quid. They said it needed 5. We didn't go any further with that. And then the last and final time, which was the closest I've ever been, where a contract was drawn up and a deal agreed, is I agreed in 2014, 15, I can't remember when, to buy 51% of the club of Massimo Cellino for £25 million, which we registered with solicitors and etc. etc. And that deal was going to go ahead. It didn't go ahead because Massimo Cellino had a mood or whatever, and the deal collapsed at that stage. I do remember, I'll never forget having dinner with Massimo at the time, and his advice was strongly that I didn't buy the club because of being a Leeds person and my children, etc., etc. So there's the times I've nearly bought it. The last time was very close because we were literally hours away from signature. The rest of the time, when people have been tying me in with the football club, has just been press. The one thing I will say to answer the question about Andrea Radrizzani, I've met him obviously many occasions. I don't know him that well. One thing that we should never, ever, ever forget in this football club for its history is what Massimo Cellino did. Because I've said to you before, we did due diligence. We looked at the football club with GFH before Massimo bought it off them. It needed £38 million in whole in the club's accounts. Massimo bought the club with no due diligence because he nearly bought West Ham, and he decided, and the West Ham deal fell away. He decided to buy Leeds, and he bought it with no due diligence. And I remember he'd heard about me, and he made contact with me. And I remember being the Flying Pizza and having lunch with him, and told him it needed 40 million quid. And he thought I'd come off a banana boat or something. He just couldn't believe what I was telling him. No, you're wrong. I said, Massimo Cellino, when I did due diligence to buy the club, buy half the club off him, 15% off him. When I did the due diligence, Massimo Cellino had put in £45 million of his own money. And I saw that with the banking documents and everything. So when people have a go at him, and I accept what we have a go at him for, because he was a nutcase, a lunatic with a lot of problems, he's the only man since Leslie Silver who's ever put one penny into Leeds United Football Club. And we should never forget that. Andrea Razzani in the Premiership and Marcello Bielsa would not be here if it weren't for Massimo Cellino.
And are you enjoying Leeds in the Premier League? Obviously not been able
David, if you want last night's result that had gone against it, I'd have had flu this morning. You wouldn't be able to see me, David. But unfortunately, they still drive me mad. And everybody who watched the game last night, when somebody missed a chance in the first half, my children look at me when I jump up and try to headbutt the telly because he's missed a chance. And my daughter, but this is a funny one for everybody. My daughter's actually going out with Gareth Southgate's son. He's gone home to his father and said to his father that I scare him watching football matches. He said, he's mad, Dad. He's mad. He starts screaming at the television. So I'm sure a lot of these people, Leeds United fans, will all have the same emotions. Sorry, there was one other part of that question. I'm sorry, what was the other part of it?
I think it was, how do you see the club's ownership structure unfolding in the coming years, the 49ers?
Okay. So the football club, from a purely business point of view, is probably worth quite a lot of money now, being in the Premiership, about 150 million of guaranteed income. So it's worth quite a lot of money. Andrea Razzani, as I'm led to believe, wouldn't have the wealth that could take it to get in the top 4 or 6 or whatever that is. So you're going to have some more money that goes into it. I know the 49ers have gone in. That seems a little bit weak to me, Dave, if I'm honest with you. It's a big company. Why don't you just go buy the lot? Why are they buying bits and pieces of it? That doesn't fill me with great. I think the key is Marcello Bielsa, and for him staying and for the club to get more and more investment in it. If he asked me to look through a crystal ball, I think in the next 2 or 3 years it'll be bought by one of the big, hopefully an Arab with 10 billion quid and Lionel Messi's players next week, and we're all happy.
Great, thanks. One more sports one for you, Steve, from Richard Norman. What are your thoughts about the future of semi-pro football clubs such as Guiseley?
That's a question, because obviously I don't own them, I fund them. So I don't know how that works, but something like that. I think grassroots football is massively important. I think the problem with football is it's lopsided. You know, just Leeds United get 150 million for going into the Premiership. So there seems an awful lot of money at one end, and then the grassroots is being forgotten. If you do that, football's finished. So I believe grassroots football will flourish. Obviously, there's a problem because of COVID, because all semi-pro football is finished. So there's no football going on effectively. It has to come back, and the Football Association, the Football League, councils, whoever, government have to put money into it and to keep it flourishing.
Thank you. I know we're running out of time now. I'm keen to sort of close, and I want to ask you in a moment, what are you both looking forward to, both personally and privately? I just thought we could finish though, Steve, are you able to tell us the Robbie Williams story? How
So,
he was
I can't. By the way, I can tell you, David, and then I can also tell you there's another one this year, but I can't tell you what it's going to be. No,
well,
right,
so just a sec. Let me just. Robbie Williams was your third choice for your housewarming party. Is that right?
That's correct. First, I am my hero, and I use it sometimes in business. My hero is Bruce Springsteen, and when we had our housewarming party, my ambition, we was going to have a proper party with somebody to play. My ambition was to get Bruce Springsteen, and he's never done a private party because apparently he's got mental issues. We convinced him through somebody who sells his daughter horses. We convinced him to play at the house, and he had agreed in writing. It's cost him $4 million. I'll never forget it. $4 million. Unfortunately, Bruce was on a world tour, and they put another date in his tour. So it meant he couldn't do the Saturday night at the house. Tried to change the dates, but it was too late at that stage. So then we got our second choice, my wife's favourite, was Prince. And after many months of negotiation, we signed Prince up to play at their house for their party. And we have a big lake in front of the house, and the lake was turning purple as he left in my helicopter to go back to Leeds Bradford Airport, back to Cincinnati. He sang Purple Rain as he was leaving. And that was all put to bed and took a lot of negotiation. Unfortunately, a week after signing the deal, I got a phone call doing our results in London, if you remember, Tony.
I did.
When I was informed that unfortunately Prince had died. So the next one on the list was Robbie Williams. I was a bit worried that we'd get Robbie and he'd die as well, but anyway, he didn't. But so we got Robbie to play, and pleasingly, he sent me the most lovely letter saying that he does a lot of private functions. It's the first private function he's ever got a buzz, because he realised he was with amongst his own, were his words. Yeah. So obviously, that was a nice thing for him to say. So we've got another one this year, David. So I was hoping to do my own private Glastonbury, whether COVID will allow me to do that. So we've got an whole raft of names at the minute. So we're just getting the things into play, and hopefully COVID will be all right. So this time you can have an invite, David.
Thank you. Well, I've got my tent ready for millet.
You can be in an igloo, David, on the grounds. Yeah, but make sure you don't get into the arse shit.
Out in the cold. So, okay, we're running out of time, and we're very grateful to you both for how much time you've given us today. What are you both looking forward to, personally and professionally? What?
Okay. I'll go first, Tony.
Yeah, go on.
Right, from a few things I'm looking forward to, David. Personally, I'm looking forward to getting on my boat in the south of France that I've just bought. Once this COVID thing allows me to travel, I want to enjoy my trappings of a success on a vessel in the Mediterranean. I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm looking forward to my football team remaining in the Premiership and us kicking on next season. That's all personal things, obviously, and from a professional point of view, if you look back in some of the quotes I've given, I think it's actually to you, David. Actually, when you was at Yorkshire Post, I said my ambition was to reach £1 billion company. I can't tell you anything, and I will not be allowed to tell you anything, but I think that will be reached very, very quickly, and that's my ambition.
Thank you very much, Tony.
I mean, from my perspective, similar. I see great opportunities for the business, either in terms of organic growth or acquisition. I think we getting the high street back working again and getting retails back into action is clearly a driver. There's about 70% of our business is online related now, but there's still 30% that's traditional high street, and therefore that's really vital. And I think that's a big push for the country and for us as a business. But on a personal level, what I really want to do is start to be normal again. I'm really looking forward to spending time with my kids. They both obviously live in their own houses with their partners, and therefore spending time with them, going out for meals and being normal and doing things that we all used to do over a year ago. is really driving it. So a lot for me, it's a lot about family and getting back to some sort of normality, because I do feel as if we put last 12 months on hold to a certain extent.
Great, well, thank you very much. Steve, I should just say, when you're on your yacht in the Mediterranean, I'll be the bloke waving at you from a pedalo.
Oh, I thought you would. You've not applied for that job as deckhand, David.
I don't think I'm qualified.
No, I'll make sure you qualify, Dave. Can't you swim?
Right, I'll send you my CV.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much to both of you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience for your time. We know often these Zoom events can be strange experiences. I hope today the fantastic personalities and success of Steve and Tony have really brought it to life online. So we're very grateful. I'd just like to hand over to Richard Kramer. He's one of those lawyers that you can really trust. He gives you good, honest, sensible advice. And a nice guy to know. So Richard, thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this today.
Okay, well, you double your fee for that kind comment. Thank you very much. And well, obviously, I want to thank everybody associated with this. There are some people working behind the scenes as well, and the choreographer. So Johnny Ross has been brilliant just setting all this up. Steve's team, in particular Joanne, has been fantastic in organising it. My team around me, my business partner, Rabina, Megan, my assistant. Really want to thank all three of you for making it a superb event. I think, you know, the sort of key sort of takeaways for me, I thought the initial comments about the strategy, which seems to be agility and ability. And that struck me because, you know, I'm obviously a lot of business people, you know, had a very difficult year, and there's, you know, a lot of people with a lot of worries and anxieties. But what you detect from all three of you is this great positivity to overcome adversity. And I think, you know, that's probably testament from the background that you've both had. You know, you're both, you know, sort of working lads, you know, born in, you know, the tough part of Leeds, and you've never forgotten your roots. And I think that down to earth quality has never left you, and that's probably testament to the reason why Clipper is so successful, and long may it continue. So on a personal note, I want to thank all three of you very much. Steve, I promise to lose a bit of pounds in the gym when I see you back in the David Lloyd. He's had a go at me already, but no, it's fantastic. And obviously thank you to all of the guests for attending, for giving up your morning. Hopefully it's been very inspirational. I'd like to say next time we meet will probably be a live event. That might not be till perhaps the summer, and that's our aim. But I wish everybody health and happiness, and let's forward to getting back to some normality. Enjoy the rest of your morning, and thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.